everywhere you look, that's all you observe. You observe predators and prey and animals eating vegetables, and that's it. And I think that this concept of overcoming adversity is it's so human. It's so a part of what we are that I want to bring it back to you, because one of the things that I've been considering is that I've said this many times, and I just had a conversation with my good friend Steve Ranella the other day where he brought it up independently. He said, I think Jordan Peterson is the most misunderstood and misinterpreted guy in the world. He's like, people are always like, not just misinterpreting, but misstating what you believe and misstating what you say. This opposition to you, this, I mean, like we were talking about this GQ interview, which I thought was, I thought that woman was far more intelligent than and her approach was far better and far more reasoned and well thought out than some of the other attacks on you before. So they're bringing in the varsity level players is what I'm saying. It's like, but I think this is important. I think this is part of what forges this message is that you are, and and this is one of the things that Eric Weinstein and I had said about you, is that you're essentially the Hoist Gracie of the intellectual dark web. If you don't know what that means, is the early days of the UFC, no one knew what the best martial art was. And the idea was like there was all these martial arts that are running around independently, and they were all claiming that they had the best technique, and let's see what happens. And Hoist Gracie was the one who represented jiu-jitsu and went out there and beat all these people with superior technique and superior strategy.
South American?
Yes, he's from Brazil.
Brazil, yeah, okay. I know about him, yeah.
And he launched this Brazilian, and his family launched this Brazilian jiu-jitsu empire that has since taken over the world of martial arts. But you are the one who's consistently engaging in these people. You're the one who's involved in these Vale Tudo events where you're debating these people who are coming at you hostile with notes. And I think as uncomfortable as those moments are, like, who was the woman that said, so what you're trying to say is...
Yeah, Kathy Newman.
Yeah, I think her approach... I think she misunderestimated you. I think she underestimated you. I think she misinterpreted who you are, and she thought that she could come at you with this straw man sort of article and argument, rather, and frame your positions in a very unflattering way. It just didn't work.
No.
It was like the early days of Hoist Gracie. Guys would come at him flailing, and he'd get him in an arm bar, and they'd tap out, and they'd go, fuck. That's kind of what happened with you. But now this woman who you had this conversation with in GQ, she was much more skilled.
Yeah.
She was better verbally.
Yeah.
Her arguments made more sense.
Yeah.
She seemed more reasonable, more well-read.
Yeah.
She was able to think on her feet quicker. But still, these are really important conversations.
Well, it was a funny day because I went to the hotel room in Baltimore, and I went out of my way to do it. And she was hostile to me the second I walked into the room.
Really?
Yes, and that really kind of put me off.
How so?
Well, she basically told me that we were going to have a war. Not so many words but just there was a coldness to her and a distaste for me that was sort of radiating from her. So she was animus possessed from a Jungian perspective. That's the right way of thinking about it. One of the ways of thinking about that is that she had a chip on her shoulder in relationship to me. So she'd already formulated who I was in her imagination.
Right.
And it was also maybe a form of projection. So like I was the embodiment of all the things that she found distasteful. And that's who she was. So there was no willingness to consider on her part that I could be different than her preconceptions of me, right? And so she was hostile to me in the way that you would be if you were prejudiced against someone right from the beginning. And so by the time it was uncomfortable in the room, and by the time and there was a photo shoot, and so by the time the conversation started, I was more impatient than I would normally be, because one of the things that I do expect from journalists, and Kathy Newman was like this, by the way, and so have some of the other people that have gone after me, at least they had the professionalism to be civil before the interview started. Right. Because there's a certain amount of politeness, I would say, that not that I'm owed, but that someone you're interviewing is owed if they come out of their way to go talk to you.
It's just human decency.
Yes.
There's no real conflict, right? Until you have this conflict, it's just hello. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, thank you
just
for coming.
Two human beings interacting with each other.
Yes,
Yeah.
on relatively
Socially,
professional,
yes.
well, even just professional, right?
Right.
Even just professional grounds. It's
Yes.
like, well, we're both here to do a job, and I've agreed to come, but no, there was palpable enmity in the air right to begin with, and when I actually thought at the end of that interview, I thought, geez, maybe I've done enough interviews, because I found that I was more impatient than I would have liked to have been. Now, luckily, it doesn't seem to have gone overboard, because I've been watching the comments on that GQ interview, and I think it's got about 4.5 million views, some ridiculous number of views. And people have said that I was more impatient and a little harsher than usual, which I think is true. And I thought, God, maybe I'm starting to run out of patience, which isn't good, right?
Right.
I don't want to run out of patience.
Because then it will flavor the message that you're putting out there.
Definitely.
And people will take it in the wrong way, and they'll take it in with that bitterness.
Yes, exactly. Well,
Yeah.
and one of the things that I think is very important is that you don't become resentful. Like,
Yeah.
and when I'm on this tour, for example, like, there's no resentment for me, because you might think, well, this is a lot of work, and I've been running around like mad, and it takes a lot of organization, and it's quite demanding, and all of that, and that's all true, and that none of that is a complaint. And I decided with Tammy right at the beginning that, well, first of all, that this was going to be work and not a vacation, because we're not stupid. We know you can't have everything at the same time if you have any sense. You're lucky if you get some things that are good at once, So we're very grateful to have that opportunity, and that I was going to continue to do this as long as I was thrilled to be in front of the audience, and then when I meet people afterwards, that I'm not looking at the end of the line to see when the night ends, because I want to be sure that every single person that comes to meet me, I'm, present for. Absolutely, because I am actually quite taken aback and thrilled, I guess is the right word. Grateful.
Gratitude,
that's better.
yes.
That they're there. It's like, God, man, some of these people, like they're coming from all over the place. People fly in from Australia into Europe. They've flown. Lots of Eastern Europeans came to England. In fact, they're making huge treks. There was guys who came from they took them 12 hours to get through Russia to come to Finland to watch the talk there. And then not just a few people like that. People are really going way the hell out of their way, and then they line up, and it's not inexpensive, because these venues are expensive and all of that. And I'm doing, and it's the same with the damn interviews. It's like, I'm doing my best to not take any of this for granted and not get annoyed about it. And that goes for the conflict too. It's like, well, I've tried to have my agent screen out maybe the more egregious interviews, the ones that would just be nothing but combat, because I find them quite stressful, though I wouldn't say I'm hiding from them. But you don't know to begin with how an interview is going to go, and I could just say, well, I'm done having interviews for a while, but I can't help but see that the conflict is a necessary part of this, even though I don't find it pleasant. Like, people think, they accuse me of being a provocateur, of enjoying the conflict, and it's actually not true at all. I don't enjoy it at all. It usually takes me about 3 days to recover from a particularly contentious interview, because I find conflict, interpersonal conflict, quite stressful.
Yes.
But I think
everyone does.
Yes.
And to pretend you don't, you're either a sociopath or you're a liar.
Yes. Well, there are people who seem to enjoy that kind of intellectual combat, that they and the political types are more like that, but
But I think they still afterwards feel it, and if they read the comments and people are against them, it's just that the unease, it carries.
Well, you would think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know how people deal with it, because I'm being fortunate, because although I've had a fair bit of negative press coverage, the comments on YouTube in particular, which is where the bulk of them are, and I would say among the general public, have been overwhelmingly positive. I don't know what the hell it would be like to be in a world where that was reversed, where the majority of people are against you.
I've seen it. I've seen it happen with guests that I've had on the show, where I've met them afterwards, and you see a physical effect on them. You see them beaten down, like, Jesus Christ, those comments are so mean. I'm like, you can't read those. You just can't read those. And you see how it's affecting them. Like, they can't sleep. They read it. It fucks with them. They'll stay up for nights. You know, it's not good. It's you're taking in all of these opinions of hundreds, if not thousands, of people that you don't even know. You don't know if they're coming from a healthy place, and most of those opinions, they would not express it that way if they were talking to you. Even if they could get the same message across, like, I think you were ignorant to these facts. I think you're biased in your perceptions. Even if they had an opinion that was unflattering, the way that to express it to you, they'd be considerate about you and your feelings as a human being. And if they weren't, you wouldn't take into consideration what they're saying, because like, this guy's just an asshole. But when you just see it in type, we just see print, it just doesn't, it could be a smart person, it could be a psycho, it could be a fool, it could be anything.
Well, it's also funny too, because the negative comments that are part of social media seem to be just as potent as negative comments in real life, but the positive comments don't seem to be as positive as the positive comments in real life. Like, and they don't seem as real. And I guess that's partly because we're wired, you know, to be more sensitive to threat and to negative emotion, because we can be hurt.
Well, it's also healthy too to not stroke your ego too much. If you're just like concentrating only on the like there's something distasteful if you go to someone's page and they just retweet all the positive things that people say to them, because then it has this sort of reinforcing side. Like, people know that if I say something really positive to Jordan, he's going to retweet me. Like, there are some people that they engage in this sort of commerce. You know, like, you say something positive, they retweet you, and you know, it's a little too strokey,
right?
You know? People get really into that, stroking their own back.
Well, I guess, I guess the danger of that is that possibility of that ego inflation that you really want to avoid, because that's a bad idea. That's a very bad idea.
Well,